Hello, Star Trek fans, and welcome to the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we're watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 6, Episode 7. You are cordially invited. This episode aired November 11th, 1997. Before we start talking about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, Sacrifice of Angels?
This season has been so serious. It has been so heavy. So it's really nice to have an episode that is a little more lighthearted. That is a little bit more the positive side of Star Trek and Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, and more self-contained and takes itself less seriously. Yeah, for absolute sure. This is the time to throw this one in.
I think so. Not that any of those episodes were bad.
You commented that you'd listened to one of the older episodes and that there was a lot more laughter and humor in it. And it's like, yeah, because we were putting programs in doghouses.
Right,
and totally goofball stuff. And then all of a sudden we get into the Dominion War and it's a little bit serious.
Agreed.
Plus, I think the show also takes itself more seriously now, maybe because it's well established at this point, and they're doing more the vision of what the creators had, which is always going to slant to stories that are more serious.
Yeah.
Well, then maybe we should get started.
I think so.
In the cold open, Sisko starts the episode with a personal log, but first we get a shot of the station from the outside with a lot of Federation ships surrounding it for a change instead of the Dominion ships.
Much better.
We do see one Klingon ship, of course. While Sisko is talking, we see Bajoran, Klingon, and Federation banners dropped from the ceiling of the promenade. People are laughing and smiling, and Sisko says there is a celebratory mood on the station, even though the war continues. The station has been designated as the headquarters for the 9th Fleet, and it remains a tempting target. But with all this happiness, the war seems very far away.
Yes.
This is something I mentioned in our Prodigy podcast, where the captain of that ship, Dal, was doing a log at the beginning when they brought the show back and kind of catching us up on what happened since the last episode. And it's just so Trekky. You really get the feeling like, okay, now we're going to be happier. Yeah. Things are okay. So Sisko heads into Ops, where Kira and Sisko both are clearly happy to be back in each other's lives again.
Oh, this was awesome.
It was very cute. She tells him General Martok is waiting in his office, and Sisko asks if he's mentioned it's good to be home. And Kira laughs. She's like, yeah, once or twice.
Oh, that totally got me. Loved that.
Too much happiness, though, always makes me nervous.
True.
So now we go to Martok in Sisko's office, and we find out that he's been named Supreme Commander of the 9th Fleet. Sisko congratulates him, but Martok is like, do you have any idea how much paperwork a Supreme Commander has to do?
That's his concern?
Yeah, a Supreme Commander should surely have an intern or an assistant to do the paperwork. I mean, come on.
Delegation is an important part of the job.
Especially with those kind of tasks.
Yeah.
Well, Martok is in a growly mood, though. He seems annoyed that he's not on the front line of the war anymore. He also asks that Worf remains as his intelligence officer, which Sisko is okay with, though Martok says he's sick of Worf talking about his upcoming wedding. He says at least when Alexander turned up, he had something else to talk about.
Worf seems a little obsessed with the wedding.
Absolutely. Sisko hasn't met Alexander yet, and Martok says he's a fine boy, dedicated and eager. But he's not the best soldier, which we definitely have already seen.
Yeah, we get more on that in a minute.
Well, now we go to Alexander in Quark's bar, and he's telling a story of one of his screw-ups to Dax and Worf. He's in very good humor, and he says the Rataran crew thinks of him as a good luck charm. He says the more mistakes he makes, the safer they feel.
He basically causes chaos in his wake from the sound of it.
Well, then Alexander reveals that he got new orders this morning to transfer to a different ship, along with most of the Rataran crew. Worf and Dax are both surprised by this. And then he, really politely asks if anyone wants more blood wine, and he heads to the bar. He is so not a Klingon. It's actually quite cute.
Yes.
And to contrast him with how hard Worf works to be a Klingon makes this pairing very funny.
Oh, definitely. He's a real contrast between Worf's almost idealistic Klingonism and Alexander, who's just sort of, I go along with it.
He's kind of laid back.
Yeah. He's a surfer dude Klingon.
He kind of is. Well, after he steps away from the table, Quark sits down and says, Alexander's a handsome boy. He obviously gets his looks from his mother's side. Very Quark.
Yep.
Well, Quark wants to know if they've reconsidered his offer of getting married in the bar. Worf says the ceremony will take place on the Klingon homeworld after the war, but Dax says maybe we should do it here this week before Alexander's transferred away. Worf doesn't agree at first, but eventually he agrees because he might not be able to see Alexander for quite a while.
Right.
When Alexander comes back to the table, Worf asks him to be his Taiweon, which translates to sword bearer, which is apparently like best man. And he gets so excited he accidentally knocks into one of the waiters and then makes a big mess. And Quark just says, I'll put that on your tab. And we cue the theme song.
I like this opening for several reasons. I felt it was really uplifting.
Yes.
After everything we've had, it was so positive.
Yeah.
And now Kira doesn't have to live on a station with her worst enemy and the worst enemy of her people.
Yeah.
You could almost feel the relief of Kira. The world is back to being less chaotic.
Yeah, she can actually work with someone she trusts again. She doesn't have to feel like she's under the threat of basically physical harm every time she goes into work.
Yes.
And she can be herself. All of these things are good.
And I just get this feeling Alexander is one of those guys who isn't necessarily clumsy in themselves. It's just they manage to time things perfectly. So chaos follows them round.
Yeah, for sure. And it's nice that the crew of the Rataran has taken to him and they're not making him be persecuted all the time, because I think that would be really hard on Worf.
Right.
And of course on him.
I like Dax's practicality. I think maybe this is where the advantage of living 7 lifetimes come from. You're a little bit more down to earth and practical about things.
Yeah. And when we last saw Alexander, we were concerned that maybe Dax didn't even know about him. So I'm glad that it's at least she knows that he exists and she's talking to him.
Oh, yes. Yeah, just dropped in conversation. Oh, by the way, I have a kid who pretty much I exiled from my life.
Yeah, who I abandoned. No big deal.
Yeah.
Well, after the theme song, Dax is talking to Kira about the new wedding plans. And she's like, no big deal. Worf has it all planned out already. Kira wonders if the wedding is only about what Worf wants or if she has any say. And Dax says Worf has been thinking about a formal Klingon wedding since he was a child. And she says she's already had 5 weddings, so she's a bit bored with the whole thing.
Oh, dear.
And then they see Odo in the hallway walking toward them, but he quickly exits stage left. When Dax asks what was that about, Kira admits that they've been avoiding each other since the Dominion left the station.
Okay, we got to do some over-analysis here.
Okay.
Has Kira not debriefed Sisko about what happened on the station and Odo's interactions with the evil founder?
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps it's classified, so Dax isn't privy to what went on. I would think as well, from a strategic standpoint, if you didn't know Odo, if you were just some evil Starfleet admiral in the Ivory Tower, you'd be worried that Odo was just going to go off and join the founder cult again.
Yeah.
And cause all sorts of trouble.
Yeah, I can see your point. Part of me is like, well, that's just not what this episode is about.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that even if Kira didn't tell Sisko, that Odo would have told Sisko. I don't think it's a secret what happened.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he came through in the end, and without him, they wouldn't have succeeded. So it's a very Star Trek thing to go, well, you were evil last week, but everything's fine now.
That's true. Oh, and I guess Sisko at this point probably has a lot of weight to throw around.
Oh, I would think so, yeah.
Odo's staying. He's my security officer. He came through in the end. That's all that matters. Yeah, okay.
But my real question is, has Sisko told anybody what happened? I think that's my first over-analysis point today.
Ah.
But we'll get to that. Well, now Worf calls Sisko, Martok, Bashir, and Miles together to say his wedding is taking place in 6 days. By tradition, the Klingon man spends the 4 nights before his wedding on a mental and spiritual journey called Kalhaya, the Path of Clarity, and he's accompanied by his closest male friends. Martok, of course, is thrilled. 4 long nights filled with song and fellowship, a time of unbridled pleasures.
Oh, Martok.
And Miles and Bashir think it's a bachelor party, and that sounds great, though they don't seem to notice when Worf says, oh, yeah, it's similar to a bachelor party. I mean, come on. You can't really think this is going to be anything other than some torturous event. It's Worf. He loves to suffer.
Well, I was wondering because of what Martok said, whether it was actually going to be a 4-day reenactment of Lord of the Rings.
I'm I would have thought it would be like that episode with Quark and Grilka, where they act out the battles and everything leading up to the wedding.
That would also make sense.
Yeah, but this is so much worse.
But you pointed out, Worf does like to suffer, so
Yes.
This has got to be some kind of suffering ritual.
Why would you sit there and think Worf wanted to have a party? Worf never wants to have a party.
He stands in the corner staring at the paintings when you have a
He stands
party.
in the corner staring at the wall. That's Worf.
Yeah.
Oh, dudes.
Before you agree, wouldn't you also just want to look this up?
Yeah. Could we talk about the details? You know, what does this mean?
Exactly what happened.
Bashir went to Risa with him. He knows Worf cannot have fun.
That's very true.
Well, Worf says they'll meet in the holosuite tomorrow night at 2100 hours. It's a very late time for a party to start when you're old. Martok advises everyone to get plenty of rest. After everyone leaves, Sisko asks Martok what Dax is going to be doing while they're on this journey, and Martok says she'll be taking a different journey with his wife. And Sisko is like, your wife? First time we've heard about this. And then we go to Martok and Sisko walking to an airlock to meet a docked Klingon ship. Martok explains that by marrying Worf, Dax is joining the House of Martok, and the Mistress of the Great House must approve all marriages. He says Cirilla will spend the next 4 days evaluating Jadzia. That
no pressure.
Does not sound good. And now we meet Cirilla, who is a tall woman with an impressive and ornate costume full of gold, purple, and emerald green. And it's topped with a bit of a tiara as well.
Oh, yeah, she is dressed to the nines.
She's impressive.
That's going in the best costumes for season 6.
Oh, it definitely should. Martok calls her my lady, and she says he's fat and his hair is going gray.
I thought you would be in your grave by now.
Yes. She also says she thought he'd be in his grave by now, and Martok laughs and says, I shall endeavor to die this year if possible. He introduces Sisko, who welcomes her, and then she asks where Dax is and says she'll find her way on her own. Once she walks off, Martok says, isn't she magnificent? And Sisko is like, sure. Sure.
Martok is positively glowing with pride here. I assume this is a wonderful Klingon partner.
Now, I'm going to do your trick and ask some
Yes.
over-analysis questions at this point.
Oh, okay.
Do you think that while Martok was a shapeshifter for 2 years, that she interacted with him at all? I was wondering if perhaps this brought her some dishonor, like the fact that she didn't know he was a shapeshifter. Maybe that made her look bad and she's holding a grudge, and maybe that's why she's a little crotchety.
That's a really good point.
Because it was 2 years. Somebody must have interacted with him, but I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe he didn't go home for 2 years, but they don't mention it. But I did have that curiosity.
That's true. It could reflect back on her of you didn't even know your husband was a shapeshifter.
Exactly. I have to say, I got a lot out of this episode. I'm not sure why. Maybe because we were coming back down to earth of like a normal episode.
Yeah.
And I was really into this. So yeah, I had all sorts of questions about her.
But I just loved this scene. I thought it was great showing that just sort of weirdness of Klingon relationships.
Yeah. And how happy Martok was to see her. It was cute.
Yeah. I can relate to this, though. I feel the same way about you. Although I don't think you've ever been that rude. Probably because you're not a Klingon.
No, I'm pretty sure I've never stood in the doorway after having not seen you for a while and said, you're fat and I wish you were dead. I'm fairly confident that has never happened.
No.
Although that might be something my mom would say. Remember when she saw some people with an older dog and she said, isn't that dog dead yet? Oh. So it is in my genes.
Oh, so you're part Klingon.
Maybe so, yeah. I never thought about it, but I do like the songs.
Yes.
And when we get to the wedding ceremony, you're going to find I like that a lot. So yeah, maybe.
Wow.
But there's a lot of Klingon stuff I don't like. We're going to talk about that too as we go here.
Okay.
So, I'm complicated.
Isn't she magnificent?
Now we go to Dax's quarters and she's lighting some candles and Worf asks if they are real Varharma candles, which makes Dax sarcastically say, oh yeah, I traveled to Kronos, captured 3 Targs in the Hagar Mountains, made a ritual sacrifice at dawn, traveled back to the station, asked Quark to boil their shoulders into tallow. Then she says, I spent 2 days molding them into candles. And Worf is like, oh my God, I was just asking a question. But Dax says, no, you were criticizing, like always. Relax. Martok's wife is not going to reject me just because the candles in her welcoming display were replicated. Of course, she hasn't met the woman yet.
Yeah.
And then in comes Cirilla, And Dax says something to her in Klingon, which I can only assume was some formal ceremonial thing that Worf told her to say.
Yeah.
And Cirilla asks what Worf is doing there and kicks him out. So it's going great so far.
She chases him out. It's awesome.
Yep. She says to Dax that her worthiness to join her house will be judged according to the traditions of her family. And Dax says she's ready. But Cirilla's like, I doubt that. The Klingon woman would find it difficult to find my favor. For an alien, it would be close to impossible. So we're off to an awesome start. She's quite prickly.
Calling her an alien.
Yeah. She says the evaluation will begin in the morning, and then she criticizes the replicated candles, which we all saw coming.
Oh, everybody saw that coming.
And she leaves Dax, of course, causing Dax to roll her eyes. It's all going great.
Surely Quark could have gotten hold of something like that. Real ones.
Some real ones, yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
But even that, maybe if she hadn't made them herself, she still would have been criticized.
Oh, you bought them.
She would have found something to criticize. She seems like that type.
Yeah. Oh, box wine.
Thanks for the wine. Was the box or the screw top the only option? On the Ratara now, Worf is annoyed that Martok hadn't warned him that his wife was opposed to the marriage. Martok isn't too bothered. He says, she's a woman of strong convictions who believes bringing aliens into the family puts us at risk of losing our identity as Klingons. Worf says that's a prejudiced, xenophobic view. But Martok says, well, we are Klingons, Worf. We don't embrace other cultures. We conquer them.
I think they should have brought up the Children of Time again. Remember the Klingons there? Some by birth, some by choice.
Yes.
Here was a race that embraced Klingon tradition when some of them weren't biologically Klingons.
Right. Well, Martok says if someone wishes to join us, they must honor our traditions and prove themselves worthy. Worf says Jadzia is worthy, which Martok agrees to. He says, yeah, she's an honorable woman and a formidable warrior, but he's not going to interfere with Cirilla's domain. Worf volunteers to talk to her, but Martok says, I don't think that's a good idea. Turns out she doesn't like Worf either.
That was fantastic. Something I loved here was the way a lot of that traditional Klingon bluster was actually dropped. They were just talking as friends, and Martok as the head of the house. They didn't need to posture.
Yeah.
So you saw Martok being almost down to earth.
Yeah.
He didn't need to make a big show of it. He's like, oh, well, she doesn't really like you either. I really thought that whole thing was funny. I felt this was what Klingons like are behind closed doors. When they're not having to posture, they're like just people.
Yeah, it seemed very natural, and it was very funny to watch. At one point, Martok is really finding the whole thing hilarious, and Worf is his usual sourpuss. I mean...
Right.
Yeah, it was great. Worf is so busy trying to have everything perfect that he's never happy with something that is just good. It would be really hard to live with somebody like that when they were like that about everything.
Well, I think this all comes back to Worf feels he needs to be the super Klingon. He needs to be the perfect example.
Yeah.
Buys into all the Klingon mythology, rituals, and it needs to be perfect. The sort of the ideal Klingon. But
if you don't surround yourself with people who have those same thoughts and plans, you're going to be miserable all the time.
Oh, yeah. And you'll annoy all the people around you.
Yeah. There is a thing at the beginning of the episode when Martok and Sisko make a joke about how nobody likes to work more than Worf. Like, he would just work all the time. So, yeah, he really has trouble having fun, for sure. Well, now we go to a cave in the holosuites where the bachelor party is getting underway, and everyone is wearing some kind of sleeveless robe that the Klingons really love in formal ceremonies.
Yep.
And there's a raging fire, so it's quite warm in this small place. Miles asks Alexander for some details about what's going to happen, but he doesn't know. He has no idea.
You had a whole day to look it up.
Yeah, come on, Google people.
Yeah.
I don't know. These guys are kind of boneheads.
That might be part of it.
Yeah.
They're making assumptions where they really should have looked into it, especially with people like the Klingons.
Also, maybe you don't want to know, though. Just like, okay, I'm just going to go get through it, get to the party, because that's what they think.
True.
They think there's a big party at the end.
I'm going to do it for my friends.
So Martok and Worf enter, and they instruct the guys to pick up mustakas, which are like big sticks with what looks like pillows on the end of them, but I imagine it's supposed to be bags of rocks. Martok says, at the conclusion of the wedding ceremony, you will use these to attack Worf and Dax. The tradition, of course, dates back to the time of Kahless. At his wedding, the happy couple was nearly killed by attacking troops moments after they were married. But until the ceremony, they must keep these sticks with them. Martok does say it's a symbolic attack only. But still, it's Klingon. Come on.
Yeah.
And then Alexander goes for a giant turkey leg on a table, but Worf says, that food isn't for eating. It's there to tempt us to break our fast. Uh-oh.
The 4-day fast.
Oh, no. Turns out there are 6 trials they must face, and deprivation is the first, and they now begin a fast that will last for 4 days. Martok, of course, is like, this is so much fun. Woohoo!
And the tasks are blood, pain, sacrifice, anguish, and death.
Yeah, that sounds like a real party. Bashir makes a comment saying it sounds like marriage, which is a little derogatory, but we'll move on. Now we go to Quark's where he is preparing for the wedding. Jake comes in and he says he sold a book of stories about life on the station under Dominion rule. Quark isn't impressed because he's not getting paid for the book. Jake asks where his dad is, and Quark says he's still in the holosuite at the Klingon bachelor party.
Of course, the two of them make completely the wrong assumptions about what a Klingon bachelor party is like.
Of course. Back to the holosuite, and we see Alexander has fainted from the heat, which I have to say is a very normal wedding tradition. Somebody always faints from the heat.
Yeah.
Bashir and Miles suggest turning down the heat, but the Klingons are not impressed with this idea and suggest that the humans might want to quit. But then they all act tough, of course, and then the singing starts.
Yes.
And Martok and Worf are good singers. I was very impressed.
Okay, overanalysis time.
Yeah.
Would Bashir have a higher tolerance to the temperatures and the conditions than other humans because of his genetic enhancements?
Yeah, good point. I hadn't thought about that, but at the very least, he would have more stamina.
Yeah.
But could he stand fasting longer? That I don't know. Maybe.
We need to see the catalog, what features his dad checked off.
Yeah, we need the window sticker of all the features, all the options that were picked.
Yeah, exactly. Alexander does seem to be embracing his Klingonness as well.
Oh, yeah, he's trying. Now we go to Dax's trials, where we find her holding some giant heavy buckets while reciting something in Klingon.
I think they were also on fire. They were like burning rocks or something in them.
Oh, even better. Cirilla makes her do it again and again because she's sloppy and complaining. Cirilla tells her just to give up and go back to her own people, but of course, Dax doesn't do that.
This looks like some kind of Jedi trials.
Yeah, it did seem like that.
Bad at this you are.
Oh, I imagine what we're trying to show here is maybe a statement about interracial marriage. Probably not that inaccurate with the kind of nonsense people have to put up with.
True.
Then we go to an ad break, and after that, Dax has to recite the history of the women in Cirilla's family. And now, this is the kind of thing I would think Dax would be very good at.
Yes.
But because she's Dax, she has dug up some dirt on the real story. You know, things for her podcast, Inappropriate Conversations.
Jadzia really isn't helping.
She is not. She's discovered some skeletons in the closet of Cirilla's 23rd maternal grandmother. It seems that the entire dynasty was put to death, and a new group of Klingons were given the titles and the names of the original imperial family to create the illusion of an unbroken line.
Nice.
So the woman who Cirilla thinks is her 23rd grandmother isn't even a relative. This does not gain Dax any favor in this ritual. She does seem to be enjoying this torture as well, but I don't think this is a good idea to poke this bear.
No. People with a vested interest in a particular version of history get very upset when you tell them the actual truth.
Yeah, they don't want the truth.
And you'd think Dax would be a little bit sensitive to this, especially with the Klingons.
Yeah.
You know she's going to be very interested in preserving the vision of her ancestry.
Yeah, but Dax isn't terribly sensitive. They're trying to make a point that she makes fun of everything.
Yeah.
She's also not dumb, though, and she would know the moments not to make fun of something, especially if it was so important to Worf.
You know, that's probably it, isn't it? She is doing it deliberately to actually dig Cirilla.
Oh, she's absolutely doing it deliberately.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Out on the promenade, Jake comes running up to Major Kira, asking if he can get an invitation to Dax's party tomorrow night. She congratulates him about his book, just as Odo comes out of the security office, and she turns the other direction, avoiding him again. And then they see the bachelor party guys marching along the promenade, carrying their big Fred Flintstone sticks. They do not look like they're having any fun.
Look very serious.
And plus, oh man, they must smell at this point.
If it's that hot in there, I'm thinking Master and Commander.
Oh, terrible. Jake thinks it's all an act and that they're really up to some debauchery. Kira rolls her eyes and walks off. A moderately pointless scene, except just to have that moment again where Odo and Kira were avoiding each other.
Yeah.
Back to the holosuite, and the trial of blood is now starting. No one wants to volunteer to go first, and so they all take a step back when Bashir isn't looking, and Worf thinks that Julian has volunteered to go first. He says, "Don't worry, the pain will last for only a moment."
Oh, dear.
That was very funny. And when Sisko grabs Alexander and pulls him back a step, I mean, that was laugh out loud funny.
I worry that this will be another one of those Klingon rituals that spreads blood disease.
Oh, you could be right. Or spreads the Hulk gene, or however that works.
Oh, that's right. That's a good one. Do you clean the knife after each use?
Ugh, no, never. But maybe by this time in the future, the knives could be like self-cleaning.
Self-sterilizing.
Yeah, self-sterilizing. Exactly.
You know, I bet that was a major invention for the Klingons.
I hope so. Now we go to Dax's big party, and she and Kira look like they are having a grand time.
Oh, this is a much more exciting party than the other one.
Absolutely. And some guy is twirling a burning torch. This too does not seem terribly safe in such a small environment and so close to the people. This is Lieutenant Atoya, and he is not wearing much. I get the impression that this fire dance has some Hawaiian roots, though I can't say that it's really explained, nor is it explained why he's so good at it. Everyone is very impressed, and Dax is also part of it, where she's playing a bongo drum during this whole dance. And by the way, Dax and Kira look amazing in their red and purple outfits in this scene, and they're just so happy. So you know something bad is coming, because you cannot be happy.
Oh, definitely. You can't have Kira happy.
Never. Jake realizes that Quark is jealous when Quark calls Worf a walking frown. Maybe the line of the episode.
It is not like that is an inaccurate summary.
No, that is quite accurate. Well, while the party is going on, we go back to the holosuite and we find Julian and Miles hanging over some hot coals and breathing very hard. And Julian says, "It's working." He said, "I've had a vision." And he says in his vision, he sees that he's going to kill Worf. He says, "I can see it clearly." And then the two of them start saying, "Kill Worf," over and over. Oh, it's very funny.
They're like shackled to a pole over the coals.
Yes, yes. Back to the party, and everyone, including Morn, is dancing.
Yeah.
Nog is like jumping up and down instead of dancing, which Kira is finding very funny.
Because it is funny.
Odo and two security guards come in saying there's been complaints about the noise. And Odo asks how long the party will continue. And Kira says this party will continue until further notice.
She pulls rank as first officer of the station to keep the party going.
She does. Odo notices that she's in a very good mood, and he turns to leave, but Kira says, "We have a lot to talk about. Maybe we should talk now," and they head off to chat. And now Lieutenant Atoa is eating fire, which is a thing I have never understood, and it's hard for me to watch. Dax is now stroking him, and they are talking very intimately when Sorella storms in, of course.
Dax is weirdly hitting on him.
Yeah, it is awkward. Sorella tells the lieutenant to get away from Jadzia or she'll cut his head off and hang it from her belt.
I would believe that.
Oh, for sure. It's quite an entrance. The party stops, but Jadzia tells her she wasn't invited. Unfortunately, at this point, she calls Jadzia a Ryzian slut, which Dax does not take very well.
Not a good idea. No.
She says Dax is to come with her immediately to perform some ritual or she'll cancel the wedding. And then Dax calls her a name and Sorella pulls a very large knife, though Dax almost immediately knocks the knife away and punches her square in the face. Sorella then spits on the floor dramatically and leaves.
Wow.
Uh-oh. Dax acts like she doesn't care, and she starts the party back up. And Quark and Jake look at each other like, uh-oh.
Not good.
Mm-mm.
I think that's a bad move from Sorella. Jadzia did fight with Kor and Koloth against the albino. She's a proven warrior. Almost like a Worf thing. Don't pull out your knife if you're not prepared to get stabbed with it.
Yeah, but Klingons are always overconfident in their abilities to fight.
That's true.
They have to be. Well, it's the next morning now, and the place is a mess, and Dax is ordering a Ractogino from the replicator while nursing a hangover.
Ooh, nasty.
Lieutenant Atoa and Morn climb up from behind the couch and head to the door, where they of course run into Worf, and Worf says Sorella has canceled the wedding. Worf is annoyed because Dax is not going to be allowed to join the House of Martok, and she doesn't seem to care right now.
Well, she's very hungover.
She is.
There's a thing about choosing your moments, and trying to have a serious conversation with a hungover partner is not the time.
But Worf would react this way. This seems quite in character with him.
Yes, that's totally in character with Worf, even if it's the inadvisable thing to do.
Because again, as Jadzia says earlier, he's always criticizing, which is something I have complained about many times, that he's always criticizing her and doing it publicly, which is the worst part. Well, then Jadzia notices voices coming from her closet, and when she opens the door, she finds Odo and Major Kira deep in conversation, where they've apparently been all night. They ask if the party is over, and they're shocked to find out that it's 10:30 in the morning, and they rush out.
Because they're both on duty.
Yes. Dax climbs back into bed. Worf says she has to beg Cirilla for forgiveness, but Dax says that is not happening. She doesn't want to deal with that woman, who she calls an old hag, just so that Worf can get his traditional wedding. But Worf says it's more than just a wedding ceremony. He says they've embarked on a spiritual journey that will bind them together through this life and into the next.
He does know she's a Trill, right?
Yeah, her next life is not going to involve Worf. She says, maybe you're on a spiritual journey, but I just want to get married. She basically suggests here that they elope, and Worf says, maybe Cirilla was right. The wedding is off. And Dax is like, fine, and Worf leaves. This was bound to happen.
Oh, yeah. Didn't this happen with Miles and Keiko?
It did.
And they shouldn't have got married.
Yes, they should have. Yeah, that's one of my favorite TNG episodes. Data's Day. Love it. Now in Quarks, the decorations are coming down, just as Miles and Julian come in ready for the last day of torture. They ask why the wedding is off, and Quark tells them she says it's because he's a pig-headed, stubborn man who puts tradition above everything else, and he says she's a frivolous, emotional woman who refuses to take him or his culture seriously. Miles says, oh, well, they're both right, which does seem accurate. Miles and Julian are just happy to be able to eat, and they decide to order dinner.
They seem quite excited to have dinner.
Yes. They're like, can we see a menu? Now on the Defiant, Martok comes to see Worf and talks some sense into him.
Wait, Worf is back to living in the van?
Absolutely. He's never stopped living in the van.
Oh.
He probably wants Jadzia to live in the van. She wouldn't do it. She's too social.
That's a good point. Where are they going to live afterwards?
I don't know. You're the one who's seen the show.
I don't actually remember.
Well, Martok says, Worf, you've made a grave error. But Worf just isn't sure love is enough. It's obvious he and Dax are a hopeless match. When she is laughing, I am somber. When I am happy, she is crying. I thought that was funny. When is he ever happy? That never happens.
Should I ever be happy? I expect her to be crying.
He says she's nothing like the woman he thought he would marry, but Martok points out we aren't afforded the luxury of choosing who we love. He calls his own wife prideful and mercurial, and yet he loves her deeply. And then he laughs. He says, Klingons value their prowess in battle. But how hollow is the sound of victory without someone to share it with? Honor gives little comfort to a man alone in his home and in his heart.
Such a great speech.
It is, but how do we go from Ryzian slut to this line? It's total whiplash in the writing.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So Quark now is delivering giant plates of food to Miles and Julian, which you shouldn't, and I don't think you could eat that much after fasting for 3 days. But Sisko and Martok enter, and the wedding is back on. Worf is apologizing to Jadzia at this very moment, and they take the food away, and of course Quark says, oh, no refunds.
Sisko is far too happy about this.
Yeah. But then Worf comes in and says, Jadzia refused to change her mind. And Sisko says, I'll talk to her, and tells Worf to keep the others away from the food.
I am picturing Worf standing in front of the food with a bat laugh.
I was picturing in this scene Saving Private Ryan, where Tom Hanks was apparently very into the prep work and wanted to be a part of it and was quite willing to be hungry and living in the mud and whatever as they were preparing for it. And I kind of thought Sisko seemed like that. Like he's very into it. He's like, no, I'm going to do it. I want to be part of this. And the other two guys are just going, oh my God, could I please have some lunch?
I think it fits with Sisko. If he commits to something,
it does.
He's going to be 100% committed to it.
Oh, totally. And he's going to be the leader who gets the rest of them to do it too. Well, now we go to Jadzia, and she is rage cleaning her quarters when Sisko enters.
I admit, I thought when we started this, it was going to be another one of those conversations through the shelving.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Oh, we haven't seen that since, was that episode Dax?
Yeah, that was like season
one where they were talking to each other through the shelves. Oh, man, that was funny.
I thought we were going to have a throwback to that.
That would have been good. They should have done that. Well, she starts ranting about how dare Cirilla treat her badly, and Sisko just lets her do that for a minute, but eventually he points out that the Klingon things she's taking credit for were things that Curzon did. And Sisko says, I've got news for you, old man. You're not Curzon anymore. It's one of my favorite lines.
But let's also point out, even though she was not bound by it, she followed a Klingon blood feud and fought with a Dahar master.
Yeah.
She has her bona fides with the Klingons. She's got chops.
Yeah. No, she's got Klingon chops for sure. But he tells her that she can't possibly expect Cirilla to treat her like Curzon just because she carries his memories. And even if she was involved in the blood feud, he's like, to her, you're just a young woman trying to marry into her family. And if you have to bow down and kiss her boots, then that's exactly what you have to do. And he reminds her that she knew this from the beginning. She complains a little more, but he says, if you couldn't abide by these traditions, you never should have let yourself fall in love with Worf in the first place. That's very good, wise advice. She's still mad, though, because even after 356 years and 7 lifetimes, she still leads with her heart. And Sisko says that's what he's always loved about her, and that's probably what Worf loves about her, too.
I love this approach that Sisko took. He was kind of annoyed at her when he first came in, and initially was kind of berating her for, I think, letting her pride
she was being
come before what she knows of Klingon culture.
Right.
And I have the feeling this is how Sisko talked to Curzon all the time.
Yeah, that's probably true. This is where we see that friendship, really.
Yeah, and I'm just picturing him saying, Curzon, you owe the man 40 bars of latinum and you're facing 8 drunken disorderly charges. Come on.
And also he must be thinking, I have been starving myself for 3 days. You are not going to now call off this wedding. Get it together.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Yeah, it does show the depth of understanding that Sisko has for his friend.
It's interesting, though. This might be part of the reason why they don't want Trill to interact with people from their past lives.
Yeah.
For this exact reason, she's almost like assuming that these things that have happened before are really her. And she wants other people to respect that happened. But that's not the way things actually work.
That's a good point.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Like the lines between your achievements and the achievements of your past lives, past hosts. Get blurred.
Yeah.
And it feels like it's yours.
Well, now the wedding starts. And in absolute Klingon fashion, it is dark, smoky, and the lights are all red. We've got Klingons playing drums, and Cirilla takes center stage. And we see Kira is there in her gorgeous dress uniform.
You love that uniform.
Oh, I love it. The groomsmen are all standing there still in their smelly outfits. I do hope they were all allowed to shower and change.
It probably smelled like a Klingon ship in there.
Well, it did look like Sisko had on his dress uniform, so hopefully that means we got to change. By the way, if I'd known about this ceremony when you and I got married, I might have suggested that this is what we did.
I totally believe it. I could imagine that.
Now, I'll give you an option because the words of the ceremony, like the actual text, I wrote down every single word. That's how much I liked it. Now, I'll give you the option to tell me not to bother reading it all.
Can you pull out some highlights?
No, I really want you to let me do it.
Is there any chance I could stop you?
No. I mean, you could, but I'd be very disappointed. Since we're already married, so I don't get to do this for my wedding. So this is my only chance.
In that case, go ahead.
Okay. So Cirilla starts. With fire and steel did the gods forge the Klingon heart. So fiercely did it beat. So loud was its sound that the gods cried out on this day, we have brought forth the strongest heart in all the heavens. None can stand before it without trembling at its strength. But when the Klingon heart weakened, its steady rhythm faltered, and the gods said, why have you weakened so? We have made you the strongest in all of creation. And the Klingon heart said, and now Worf appears and he says, I am alone. I almost cried at this moment. Cirilla says, and the gods knew that they had erred, so they went back to the forge and brought forth another heart. And she points at the door, and Jadzia enters in a very booby red gown. It is very Klingon, I must say. They love a middle boob reveal, the Klingons.
I could see the Duras sisters wearing this when they're in a formal
totally.
event.
Yeah, absolutely. Cirilla steps back at this point, letting Alexander hand a batleth to Dax and to Worf, I guess like rings. And Cirilla continues, but the second heart beats stronger than the first. The first was jealous of its power, And the two have like a ceremonial clink of their batleths.
Yeah.
And Sirella says, fortunately, the second heart was tempered by wisdom. And Dax now says, if we join together, no force can stop us. And they give the batleths back to Alexander. And Sirella says, and when the two hearts began to beat together, they filled the heavens with a terrible sound. For the first time, the gods knew fear. They tried to flee, but it was too late. The Klingon hearts destroyed the gods who created them and turned the heavens to ashes. To this very day, no one can oppose the beating of two Klingon hearts, not even me.
That takes me back to, we slew our gods millennia ago. They were more trouble than they were worth.
Yeah. Then Sirilla asks Worf if his heart beats only for this woman. He swears to join with her against all who oppose them. And then she asks Jadzia the same thing, and she also agrees to stand with Worf. And then Sirella declares them married, and they have a big kiss. Julian and Miles are holding their mustakas this whole time, and they keep asking Martok if it's time, and he keeps saying, not yet.
Is it time?
Sirella welcomes Dax into the house of Martok, and everyone hugs, so however Dax apologized, it really worked.
Yeah.
And finally, Martok says, now, and Julian and Miles rush toward Worf, screaming and brandishing their big sticks. And then the screen goes black, and we just hear thuds as they obviously take the ceremonial attack quite seriously. Yes, and the closed caption said, thud, thud.
That was priceless. That was so well done. That was very funny.
The end.
That was laugh out loud.
I laughed out loud at that ending. So funny.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for letting me read that whole thing. Why didn't we have that at our wedding? You should have brought that up. You should have said, gee, Kim, why don't we have a Klingon wedding? I would have looked into it and been like, oh, totally. We should have a Klingon wedding.
It is quite impressive.
Oh, so amazing. Okay, let's do some overanalysis. What do you have?
Okay. First thing. So Julian made a negative quip about marriage during the Klingon stag party.
Mm-hmm.
I assume that's because the role model of his mother and father isn't exactly a great marriage.
Well, I don't know that the role model is quite that bad.
Yeah.
He's just a malcontent about relationships because it's never really worked out for him.
Yeah.
What we didn't know at the beginning, or at least what I didn't know at the beginning, and what I know now is that Julian has always had to hide his true self. And so he was always putting up this front. So that would be true with people that he was trying to have a relationship as well as people he worked with and friends, acquaintances, and whatever. And so that would make everything really hard and would also make every relationship so shallow. So I don't know. He's just a whiner about this for some reason.
Bad stereotype.
Bad stereotype. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Next thing.
Yeah.
Now, these guys were invited by Worf to take part in his Klingon version of a bachelor party.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good idea to investigate what exactly that would mean. Because you're dealing with a lot of different cultures.
Yes.
Bolians, Andorians, all these other races. And some other races could have very interesting customs. Oh, my closest friends, my closest male friends, on the night before my wedding, you all chop off the end of your little finger, and my partner-to-be wears that as a necklace for the next 24 hours.
Uh-huh.
You'd really have to look into these things.
Yeah.
What might be seen as a harmless custom could be really harmful to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I know it's kind of comedy, but thinking it in real terms, you would have to be very careful about agreeing to these things.
I agree. I always feel like I'm always looking into things in maybe too much detail to make sure that I'm prepared and that I know what I'm getting into. Certainly when it comes to weddings, even when there are weddings here in the US.
Yeah.
But when there was a time when we were planning to go to a wedding in the UK, and I think about how much research I did because I didn't know anything about it and I wanted to be prepared. And these are things that aren't going to harm me in any way. So it seems so silly to me that you wouldn't look into it, especially when you know it's a Klingon thing. And think about like that ritual that Worf went through on the Enterprise. I can't even remember anymore, but where they actually were hitting him with pain sticks. Do you remember that? That's the kind of stuff the Klingons do. He had to walk through fire and they're hitting him with pain sticks.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you assume this would be terrible?
I can only imagine how bad a Nausicaan bachelor party would be.
Oh, yeah. They'd be throwing darts at each other.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Miles would get suckered into that one.
Yeah.
Oh, we play darts.
Oh, darts. Great.
Yeah. You didn't mention you throw them at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And my final point, because I think we talked about everything during the episode, I assume a large part was to basically judge the level of commitment that Jadzia has. I would wonder if part of the reason was she wanted to keep out undesirables. Cirilla sees herself as royalty or part of the imperial bloodline, that kind of thing. So wants to keep out the unworthy. Yeah,
you had mentioned that to me yesterday when we first had finished watching the episode, that you thought this was maybe about class. And I had definitely viewed it as more about race.
Yeah.
So it's probably a combination of both things, because I do believe that class is something that is maybe more embedded in your upbringing than it is in mine. Right. So maybe that's why we looked at it two different ways. But I think you could certainly apply it to both things, because she does talk about it sort of, well, Martok talks about it muddying the bloodline of the Klingons, but she's certainly completely invested in that historical picture of her history, and this is going to mess it up. But Dax was pointing out, your history's already just made up. So, why are you poking at me?
Yeah.
But you can't win in a battle like that.
No, not when it's so much part of somebody's invested identity.
Yeah. It's like you said earlier. I mean, you can't just talk somebody out of a history that they believe in. Whether it's true or not is not the point.
Yeah.
It's like trying to talk somebody out of being a racist. You just can't. It's just not going to happen in a single conversation where you say, oh, you shouldn't do that. And they go, oh, yeah, you're right.
And I think that's all I have.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay, well, my only overanalysis question is about Sisko, and has he told anybody what happened in the wormhole? And just because one fleet got blown up in the wormhole, or I don't know, I guess they got disintegrated or transported somewhere else, it seems like, couldn't there be another 1,000 ships right behind it? Why is everything just okay and happy and we're pretending like that didn't even happen?
I don't think there's any way Sisko could hide what happened.
Well, no, that's right.
All those people on the ship saw this happen.
The Defiant, they all saw it.
And we knew the ships were coming through the wormhole and disappeared.
Yeah.
The Bajorans are deeply religious. They're going to come to only one possible conclusion.
Absolutely.
The prophets saved Bajor by destroying these ships.
And the emissary was there.
Yes.
So they are going to attribute it to him for absolute sure.
Yeah. So there's almost no way they could hide it. I assume with the Bajorans, you would just carry on with your life because this is just something that the prophets do.
Yeah.
So it's almost not shocking.
It was probably foretold.
Yeah.
They're very busy looking at the prophecies to see where they should have known that's what was going to happen.
There's some Vedic going, oh, look at this one. It says, the door opens, but they shall not come through.
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. But I wonder what the founder woman is telling herself happened.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. I just think it's funny that we're not talking about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot like that old Star Trek thing where somebody becomes evil and tries to kill everyone, and then they're like, nah, it's fine now.
They're good. It's all great.
We never talk about it again.
So the other thing you said was, why don't the Dominion send more through?
Yeah.
I assume because they would be concerned they would just be destroyed.
Well, but you try one or two.
Yeah.
Right? You would send a drone, you send something through to see if there's something you didn't know. But I take your point. If it was, I forget how many ships it was it thousands?
Like 3,000.
Okay. So I guess if that many ships actually did disappear, you do have to take stock and wonder, wait a minute.
Well,
that seems awfully risky.
I would also wonder about what it would do to the rest of their fleet. Maybe it would pull their fleet so thin, they literally can't spare anymore.
Oh, maybe. I can't imagine that they would spread themselves so thin on purpose that they would become vulnerable in the Gamma Quadrant.
Right.
No. What quadrant is it?
Gamma Quadrant.
In the Gamma Quadrant, yeah. Oh my God. For a moment, I forgot what quadrant we were in. Because the Delta Quadrant on Prodigy, I'm so confused.
You've been getting too much quadrant input lately.
Yeah, I got all the quadrants now.
Anything else?
No, that's all I have for overanalysis. So let's go to women in the future. And I'm totally okay with Dax not caring about the details of the wedding ceremony. I, too, was not that particular about our wedding details, but of course I didn't know about a Klingon ceremony. Though if you had wanted some big, crazy, formal thing, I may have disagreed, but you didn't want one either. No. So I don't know. This was fine with me. But I also get that they've turned a stereotype on its head a bit, and they're making Worf the one who really cares about it.
Right.
Sometimes that can be really awkward and forced, but I do believe this about Worf. He can be so formal and so ridiculous that it's very fitting.
Yes. It would make sense with Worf because he has this very rigid view of how things should be, and he wants to be the perfect Klingon, that he would be obsessed about the perfect Klingon wedding.
Yes.
The character has been shown time and time again that he obsesses about minutiae of proper Klingon behavior. He's a super Klingon.
No, I totally agree.
They built him up to that. It's what we should expect.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would agree.
It's just sometimes there are occasions where they flip that stereotypical script and they do it still to make fun of the woman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I don't feel that here. I actually think this makes sense to me and it fits with the characters.
Agreed.
Now, the Ryzian slut comment is a problematic insult. Notice that there aren't very many male insults that involve the man being promiscuous. This is a very old, prejudiced view that somehow women aren't allowed to be sexual, and when they are, it's terrible. And they're lesser human beings. It's a real patriarchy trash of an insult, is the way I look at it. Even when it comes from a woman, it's still the same thing. Overall, I think this episode is written pretty well, but some of the things at the party and then the interaction of Cirilla and Dax were the really weak spots.
Yeah.
Just a real underestimation of women and how we behave and how we treat each other. Because even that old hag insult it's a similar one, right? It's just weak in its roots. So I think in the big picture, I will get over this. And I've gotten pretty good about getting over some of those details because I'm enjoying the rest of the show. And there were a lot of things in this episode I really liked, but I didn't appreciate that.
A better Klingon insult would be, you are without honor and you married only to buy honor.
Or weak, or something about being a Trill. Something like that would have made more sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's my Women in the Future section.
You rely on the honor of Curzon.
Of worms. So let's go to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. An enjoyable episode. It managed to mix humor with continuing the story of Dax and Worf. Worf is fantastic. Everyone in the episode I felt worked well. It was good to see Kira and Odo finally realizing that they really shouldn't be avoiding each other and should talk about things.
Yes.
The hungover Dax was funny. It's an episode where the humor worked and the story worked. And it felt like very much a real upswing from just this very intense, very heavy storyline that has dominated season 6 so far.
Gosh, you're so right about the humor. The humor really does work in this episode. There were multiple times I laughed out loud, especially at the end. But there were other things, too, that were very funny. And, sometimes we complain about the humor that somebody thought this was funny, like about the Ferengi, and it just isn't. But it really did work here. I agree with that. Yeah, I give it a thumbs up. And I know that sometimes I can appear to conflict with myself, but I love both a very quiet, realistic tale of love and an overly dramatic, world-shattering tale of love. The extreme romanticism and heroism stories also work for me. Like in Lord of the Rings, I've had people say to me there's no romance in Lord of the Rings, and I always think I must have watched a different movie.
Those hobbits loved each other.
Not the hobbits. Or even in the movie Gladiator, right? But the melodrama of the Klingon ceremony really made me love this episode.
Yeah.
Nowhere in the speech that Cirilla gave did it say he or she. It just kept referring to two hearts being stronger together. So it's really quite a contrast just in this episode between things like that and then the very narrow-minded insults that I didn't appreciate. But just the text of the ceremony made me go, oh, thumbs up. Maybe it's the soap opera watcher in me. I'm not sure. I really liked it. I liked that it wasn't gender specific, and I liked the message, which is why, I'm not joking when I say I would have liked this sort of dialogue in our wedding. It didn't have to be about the killing the gods, but the putting two hearts together to make them stronger and to make them stand against anything is an amazing message of joining two people together.
Yeah, it is definitely very positive. It is funny, though, how the Klingons, the strongest heart.
Yeah, in all the heavens.
Yeah, the gods then feared the heart. It fits with the Klingon mindset, I think, as well.
I jokingly say maybe it's connected to me liking soap operas, but I actually think it's more about my love of Greek mythology.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's more connected there. Or even, why do I love the character of Thor? Of all of Marvel, I could give all of them up. But Thor, it's the same thing. It's this exact thing.
Yeah, this is very mythological in its underpinnings.
It is. Yes, it is. All right, I think that wraps up Season 6, Episode 7. Come back next week for Episode 8. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own over-analysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at rebingeit@gmail.com or tweet us at rebingeit. We're also on Instagram and YouTube at rebingeit. You can check us out on talkthroughmedia.com, where you can leave feedback for individual episodes, and you can also listen to the other podcasts in our network. There is also a Talk Through Media Patreon, which benefits all of the podcasts on the Talk Through Media network. That is at patreon.com/Star Trek TTM.
Thanks for joining us on the Rebinge Deep Space Nine podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.